Good evening, and thanks for joining us during COVID-19 quarantine. Welcome to our emergency town hall with the U.S. Senator from Arizona, Martha McSally. I'm Erin Greenwood, Communications Director for White Coat Waste Project, and I will be moderating tonight's town hall. Tonight we'll be speaking with Senator McSally about the urgent initiatives she's working on with us right now. There's one you've probably been hearing about in the news a lot lately. It's our work to shut down tax funding for wasteful and dangerous animal experiments in Wuhan, China, at the lab where COVID-19 may have originated. We'll also get into the Senator's tremendous record of working to end government funding for animal experimentation back here at home. You can press 0 anytime to ask questions, and if we aren't able to get to your question tonight, you can stay on the line and leave a recording. You will be heard. And now I'd like to introduce you to Justin Goodman, Vice President of Advocacy and Public Policy at White Coat Waste Project.
Thank you so much, Erin, and thank you to everyone who's called into our emergency town hall tonight to hear about our work with Senator McSally to end taxpayer funding for risky and cruel coronavirus experiments on animals in Wuhan, China. We are so happy to be here with you tonight, even and maybe especially in this unusual and really difficult period we're all going through. So thank you for taking the time to be part of tonight's event. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with Senator McSally for many years, and I actually had the honor this winter of recognizing her with our Waste Warrior Award for her brilliant leadership on exposing and ending wasteful government spending on cruel animal experiments. Now, let me tell you, as the first female fighter pilot to fly in combat in U.S. history, my friend Senator McSally is exactly the person who you want to be fighting alongside. Among many, many other things that Senator McSally has accomplished, she's been the driving force behind historic efforts to end painful government experiments on puppies and dogs, which we'll update you on in a little bit on this call. She's also helped introduce the bipartisan After Act, which we like to call Violet's Law after a dog White Coat rescued from a lab. Senator McSally's After Act is the first bill ever that would ensure every single government lab allows dogs, cats, monkeys, and other animals to be retired after testing. And this effort has already prompted several federal agencies to enact policies and even release animals to rescues and sanctuaries. So you can see why we're so thrilled tonight to do this telephone town hall with Senator McSally. Thank you for being here, Senator.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Justin, and thanks to White Coat Waste Project for all your hard work and your advocacy and your passion to get the government to stop wasting taxpayers' hard-earned money on cruel and unnecessary animal tests. This is something that we can all get around, and this should be a unifying issue. It's near and dear to my heart. So many Arizonans and Americans are concerned about this. I'm really honored and happy to be here tonight to talk about my work with you on this important initiative. We recently discovered what was happening with our taxpayer dollars in Wuhan, China. It is so disturbing, and I'm excited to be talking about what we're doing to end it and some of our recent victories.
Thanks, Senator. And just for some background about what we've been doing, since last year, White Coat Waste Project has been investigating how U.S. tax dollars are being shipped overseas to foreign countries for wasteful animal tests. And last month, we were the first to expose with Senator McSally to international media how the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, has spent millions of our tax dollars funding animal testing at the notorious Wuhan Institute of Virology. If that name sounds familiar to any of you, it's because this is a controversial bioagent lab in China where many people believe, including many security experts, that the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all dealing with right now may have leaked from. And I just want to give you a sense of what we were funding over there because it's just horrendous. Some of the recent animal experiments that American taxpayers were funding at this lab in Wuhan include coronavirus-infected bats being captured in the caves where COVID-19 apparently came from, transported back to the lab, and then experimented on, coronavirus being grown in these Wuhan labs and injected into piglets, and animals having holes drilled into their heads, being deprived of water for 23 hours a day, and being repeatedly electroshocked, all at taxpayer expense in Wuhan, China. And now, making this already unacceptable situation even worse, and I know it's hard to imagine that, reports indicate that animals infected with viruses and otherwise sickened and abused in labs in China are sometimes even sold to these notorious live animal markets called wet markets for human consumption. And in fact, an experimenter in China was jailed earlier this year for selling their lab animals to wet markets for people to eat. So this obviously raises, above and beyond the cruelty and the waste of the experiments, this raises even more concerns about diseases potentially escaping from a lab and into the food supply. So based on her track record, it was absolutely no surprise that Senator McSally, who's an animal lover, award-winning waste warrior who's risked her life, literally risked her life to protect national security, it's no surprise that she stepped up to say what we found was unacceptable, dangerous, and had to stop.
Well, Justin, I'll tell you, I was stunned. There's not a lot that surprises me these days, but I was stunned when I heard from Justin and his team that it's bad enough what you just heard, what's happening in China. It's bad enough all of the elements related to this Wuhan Institute of Virology. But when we found out that hardworking American taxpayers were actually sending money to participate in this, or NIH money for these treacherous and cruel coronavirus experiments on animals, I first was in disbelief. But this is the same state-run bioagent lab that the State Department, we now know, they warned in 2018 might cause a coronavirus pandemic because of its sloppy safety practices, and the U.S. intelligence experts now believe, we still don't have access to China, we still don't know who patient zero is, but there is a potential that this may have caused the COVID-19 pandemic. China's government, of course, the communist government, won't even allow safety inspections by our authorities at this lab. Yet, federal agencies continue to allow U.S. taxpayer dollars to be sent to this facility run by a foreign adversary where there's no accountability or transparency to the American public. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, that really sounds like a recipe for disaster to me.
Exactly. So I immediately, when I saw this, you brought it to our attention, I rallied my colleagues, more than 50 senators and representatives. We sent a letter to congressional leadership first demanding no COVID-19 stimulus funds be sent to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. I mean, this should be a no-brainer, right? We should be able to say, okay, no taxpayer money that we are now putting out just to deal with the coronavirus will go there. These funds are intended to help Americans who are hurting physically and financially because of this pandemic. You better believe I'm going to make sure that that's exactly where the money's going to, not some communist-run lab in China that has zero accountability, is cruel, and is dangerous and reckless. I also then sent a letter to the NIH to express my deep concerns about the agency's past and current relationship with the Wuhan virus lab, and to ensure that not one more U.S. tax dollar is directed for these cruel animal tests there. This is especially critical given the uncertainty about where this virus originated from. Again, we're doing everything we can with our agencies to investigate it, but China silenced doctors, destroyed samples, kicked out journalists. It's been very difficult. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, you may have seen just this morning, said there was significant evidence COVID-19 originated at the Wuhan lab. We certainly can't be funding this lab, especially under these circumstances.
Absolutely. And, thank you again for all of the incredible work you've done. I mean, you didn't miss a beat, and you got out there and you were advocating very vocally that this needs to stop. And the fact that all of the situation is so horrible actually makes this good news that I'm about to share even more important. Within days of our expose, which was just a couple weeks ago, and Senator McSally's letters to agencies, President Trump went on national TV during a coronavirus briefing and announced that he was cutting the grants to the Wuhan virus lab that Senator McSally and White Coat Waste exposed. And days later, the headlines read that the grants were officially canceled. Now, that was just a couple weeks ago where that expose happened, and a week later, the president cut the funding. Talk about instant impact. So I know I speak for everyone on this call when I say how incredibly grateful we are to you for your leadership, Senator.
Oh, absolutely. You're welcome, Justin, but there's no thank you needed. I couldn't have done it without the support of the White Coat Waste Project. You guys brought it to our attention. You have countless advocates across the country urging other lawmakers to join my efforts so we could team up and have strength in numbers to cut this funding off, and we were successful. Cutting these Wuhan grants is going to help animals, it's going to preserve taxpayer dollars, and it's going to make Americans and people all over the world a whole lot safer.
Without a doubt, it's absolutely a win-win. But as is often the case with these things, our work on this isn't quite done. Believe it or not, this facility, even though the active grants were cut, is still authorized by our federal government to receive tax money in the future for even more animal testing. And that's what Senator McSally sent this letter to the NIH about, saying that this facility should be disqualified from getting any money ever again in the future. And the NIH has the authority to do that. Now, before we get to questions from folks, and I see a bunch are piling up here, I do just want to quickly touch on another big issue we've been working with Senator McSally on the last few years, which is ending dog testing at the Department of Veterans Affairs. So some of the listeners on this call probably remember that a few years ago, White Coat Waste Project exposed how the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, was injecting latex into puppies' arteries to give them heart attacks, making them run on treadmills to damage their stressed hearts, and visiting other horrendous abuses on dogs, drilling into their skulls, injecting them with methamphetamines at other VA labs around the country. And we've been fighting to end it ever since. Senator McSally, back in 2017, right when this expose first broke, you were one of the very first lawmakers to sign on to the Puppers Act and speak out against this waste and abuse. And since then, thanks in large part to your outstanding leadership, we've seen some really incredible progress on this issue.
Well, we have, Justin. And look, I'm a dog lover. I'm a veteran myself, served 26 years. When I heard that the VA, that's where I get my care, was using our taxpayer dollars to buy puppies, intentionally sicken and injure them in experiments, and then kill them, I was just appalled at this, just insane cruelty and the waste of it all. And so I wanted to make sure that we put an end to this. And I will tell you, having come from being in the military, oftentimes they're big bureaucracies, right? The Veterans Administration, the military, God bless them for what they're trying to do. But they often say, well, we have to do this. And when you push on them, why? Well, because we've always done it. You got to push on them and push on them and push on them, because they often just keep doing what they used to do. And we've got to change these types of things and stop them. So look, veterans, trying to get care from the VA face a lot of challenges. It's just troubling that the agency's been wasting scarce resources on outdated, unproductive, and inhumane dog experiments. They'll usually say we need this in order to provide, treatments for our veterans. But when you really push, there are other alternatives, we can and we should do better for our nation's veterans. And of course, dogs are a soldier's and the airman's best friend on and off the battlefield. It's a betrayal of this bond. So many of them, as we transition out of service, it's this bond that allows people to hang on and survive after experiencing all the things we experience in our service. And to have this administration subjecting them to cruel abuse in lab experiments is just wrong. So thankfully, my colleagues in Congress and the president agree. Last year, I was proud to help enact the legislation that requires the VA to phase out this testing on dogs, cats, and primates by 2025. And I'm now working to ensure this humane transition happens as soon as possible. Again, keep pushing on them. Keep pushing them for their transition. Don't just let inertia and what you've always done in the past, or don't wait until 2025 comes along. You got to do it now. So that's our focus here to stop this inhumane practice.
And thank you so much, Senator. And that's exactly the right attitude that I think you're a great role model and people need to follow. Is this stuff doesn't happen without a fight, and you have to dig in and take that fight on. And I just want to put into context the victory you just mentioned. So last year's legislation that phases out dog, cat, and primate testing at the VA, this was the very first time in American history that Congress gave a government agency a hard deadline by which to end any type of animal testing. So it's absolutely historic, and it wouldn't have been possible without the great work you were doing. And just a little more detail about this, everyone is going to be happy to hear this. Since this campaign started, the VA dog testing campaign started with Senator McSally, we've ended 75% of the VA's dog labs. They've been shut down. And all of our work together now is putting the final nail on the coffin of this wasteful program. So that's a lot for us, all of us, to really be proud of.
Thank you so much, Justin and Senator McSally, for sharing details about these important efforts and the exciting progress being made to end taxpayer-funded testing at home and abroad. There's a lot of folks on the line who want to know more about all of this. So how about we take some questions from the audience? Press 0 to ask your question. I think we have one now from Vanessa from Phoenix. Here comes Vanessa. Vanessa,
Thank
can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Great. Thank you so much, Senator McSally and Justin, for all the incredibly important work you're doing to end government animal tests. You know, I've been racking my brain about this, and I would really love to hear your thoughts. Why was the government giving millions of our tax dollars to animal testing in China? And how can we stop that from happening again?
Thanks, Vanessa. That's really a great question and gets to the heart of this issue. Anyone who follows White Coat's work may know that the federal government spends $20 billion a year, that's, yes, billions with a B, on animal testing. $20 billion, taxpayer dollars are spent on animal testing every year. And there is simply not enough oversight of how that money is being spent. For instance, in addition to the Wuhan lab that we've been talking about tonight, we've discovered that 23 other labs in China are actively authorized to get U.S. tax dollars for animal testing. 23 other labs in China are actively authorized to get U.S. tax dollars for animal testing. And in China, there's actually no laws governing animal testing. So we don't know what's happening in these labs. And what's happening right now in Wuhan is really a chilling example of how our tax dollars can be dangerously misused. And this problem is not limited to China. Unfortunately, there's many other countries that are getting American tax dollars for animal experiments. For instance, last year in December, we exposed that the NIH had sent over 17 million tax dollars to British laboratories to create animal addicts. So this included almost $12 million addicting monkeys to cocaine and heroin, $5 million to force pregnant mice to become alcoholics to cause birth defects in their babies, and $700,000 to get zebrafish addicted to nicotine, as if we don't know enough about smoking and nicotine addiction. So does this wasteful cruelty in foreign countries actually sound like a good use of your tax dollars? Because to White Coat, and I know to Senator McSally, it sure doesn't.
Justin, this has got to stop. Let's follow up after this call. These 23 labs need to be shut down. But for sure, taxpayer money needs to stop going to them. Look, I could talk all night about China, but they are our adversary. We shouldn't have $1 of taxpayer money going there. Never mind to conduct cruel animal testing. This is ridiculous. How we got here, from the questioner is a long story. Where I think there was just a lot of naivete and people thinking China was a friend or someone to cooperate with. But you combine that all, I think Americans are waking up about specifically China and what we need to do to protect America and protect the taxpayer. So in this case, we got to stop that from happening, and we'll work with you for the rest of these overseas as well. We're focusing now of the millions going to the Wuhan virus lab. When I found out about it, I was like, I can't believe of all the things we need our taxpayer money to do, that we are sending it off to this lab in China that is doing this secretive, unsafe animal research at this dangerous disease lab. We have no oversight from it. So very happy that we were able to, I'm sad we're even in this situation, but we were able to get active funding cut immediately in the moment, to this Wuhan lab. But everybody needs to understand this fight is not over. I'm going to continue to press for more transparency and accountability for taxpayer funding for wasted animal testing. We got to stop it. We got to stop sending any dollars to China. We've got to stop sending money overseas. We've got to stop having this cruelty to animals. So we're going to continue to partner with you, Justin, and your team specifically on this issue. But China should be disqualified by the weekend. Let's work on that, okay? The best way right now, I'm very impatient on this, that we can make sure it never happens again, is make sure lawmakers know you all find this unacceptable. So tell your representatives, Republicans and Democrats, it doesn't matter. This should be a unifying issue. You don't want your taxpayer dollars spent on wasteful animal testing, Trust me, they'll listen to you.
Thank you so much for these great answers. And now we have Mary from Tempe. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. You can correct me if I'm...
Tempe.
No, and I was even... Okay, Mary from Tempe. So I think wants to know about your dog, Senator. I know
seriously.
More about your dog.
Hi.
Mary, can you hear us?
I just wanted to first say I can. Thanks so much for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Hey, Mary.
First, I just wanted to say all the work that you're doing is so inspiring. You're shining a light truly on something that most people don't even know what's happening. You gave me chills talking about that. It was just so incredible. So thank you so much. Your work is really making an impact, and I think it's so amazing. Just on a lighter note, though, I know that you're such an animal lover and a big into like dogs as well. And I'm a super fan of Boomer. I have a rescue that looks just like him, and I really would just love to hear about his story and how he became a part of your family.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, like many of you who are listening, I mean, I have been an animal lover my whole life since I was a kid. I think I have a funny picture in my house of all 5 kids. I'm the youngest of 5, and we're on the beach with our dog, who was a rescue beagle at the time. And everyone's looking at the camera, and I have my arm around the dog, and I'm snuggling in with the dog, right? And so, but the human-animal bond became profound for me after I lost my dad when I was 12. And so I've always had a dog in my life, but it was after I lost my dad and my time of grieving and surviving through this. I had a golden retriever at the time, and I wouldn't have survived without Casey. And he was just such a gift and such a blessing to me to be able to get through those difficult times. So this human-animal bond is so important to me. I understand in all the ups and downs of life and all the things I've been through in the military and everything everybody's listening to, you all understand there's nothing quite like the love you have and the bond you have, with your dog, with your animal. And so Boomer is a rescue golden retriever. My previous golden retriever sadly had succumbed to cancer in the spring of 2014, and I had signed up with Rescue a Golden of Arizona. Said I was not, you never replaced in your last dog, but I was ready even in my pain to add another family member. And they called me one day right before Memorial Day weekend and said, we have this very rambunctious 10-month-old. The story was that it was a family got him as a puppy. They didn't have time for him, and he was essentially what they explained, left in the backyard. No training, not a whole lot of attention, left him a big bag of dog food, just stuck his head in his ate. I learned over time he was basically drinking out of the swimming pool. And so they said, this guy's a handful. He's big. He's energetic. He's going to need somebody, who's going to deal with his energy. We know you're a runner, an athlete. Like, can you take this guy? And I was like, absolutely. So Boomer arrived in my life back that Memorial Day weekend, Friday in 2014. And he is just, you all know. I mean, every dog's got their own personality. And this is what I need in this role in my life right now, he makes me laugh. Like, he just cracks me up. He's like a goofy, teenage boy. And those little trait that I'll share with you is I don't know if it's when he gets mad at me. I'm attributing that to him. He steals things and he buries them. And so he buries my shoes. He buries other things. And he's really good at it. Like, you cannot figure out where he buried it in the backyard. And there's sometimes weeks and months go by before you're able to find your shoe or your hat or your shirt or anything again. But he's a treat. He's a love. I mean, I just love him. So hopefully, you guys are blessed when I post funny pictures and videos of him. But I just wouldn't be able to stay sane in my life without the love of a dog. And so I'm so grateful to have Boomer in my life.
Oh, gosh, he sounds like a great dog. Like you two found each other at exactly the right time.
Yes.
Now, I have not heard this story personally myself yet, but I have heard inklings of a story about a dog who you rescued once on Thanksgiving, and I'm told it was not your dog and that there was a helicopter involved.
Well, okay. So look, here's the deal. Like many of you on the call, again, everybody will have their own story. I just can't help myself if I see a stray dog or I see a dog's out or a dog's on the side of the road. Like, I am notorious, you can ask my staff, for just blowing up my whole schedule because I'm like, I gotta go get this dog. This dog may get hit by a car. The dog needs to get home. So I have so many stories of that happening. But this last Thanksgiving, I mean, I'm hardly ever home in my home in Tucson, and I was there over Thanksgiving weekend. And so I actually, it was Thanksgiving Wednesday night, I'm out there with my neighbor walking Boomer, and all of a sudden we see this dog kind of like trot down the street. I was like, oh no, I gotta go help him. I hand Boomer to my neighbor, who is like a godsend. I mean, we have like a joint custody agreement with Boomer when I'm gone all the time. And I'm like, I gotta go help this dog. And so that was Shadow, and that became kind of the whole Wednesday night. And some school boys actually helped, and Shadow had some neurological issues. We were able to get him secured and back home safely, but it was really a challenging situation. It took several hours that night to be able to get him in a safe place. And those boys, those two little school boys, they had no idea it was their senator. I was there like in sweatpants, you know, with a shirt or whatever, just trying to help get this dog. I ended up doing a little presentation for them at their school to highlight it. But then the next morning, we're, you know, again, planning Thanksgiving that night, the next morning with my neighbor, and we're out walking, and we see this sign on the mailbox for, have you seen Dixie? Dixie's missing. And I'm like, oh, and my neighbor looks at me like, no. And I'm like, I have to help, right? So it said on there where Dixie was last seen. I won't bore you guys with all the details, but I sprung into action. Yeah, I was out running down there, and I was trying to figure out, like, I'm a pilot, right? So I'm like, man, I'm just looking through the brush. This dog's been gone for the, you know, a handful of days. Maybe we need like 3 dimensions, you know, decent air support. So I'm like calling my friends who are, you know, small plane pilots, like Cessnas or whatever, on Thanksgiving Day. Like, does anybody want to go fly and look for this dog? So we ended up realizing, like, okay, with the altitude restrictions, you really wouldn't be able to see much. But then I started engaging, trying to find a drone. I was putting up signs. I was engaging with the family. Throughout all of that weekend, we were getting sightings. And the poor family, I mean, the pregnant mom with a toddler, and they just were overwhelmed with Dixie missing. And long story short, after a weekend of trying to trace her activity, getting some reports, and, you know, laying out some food and water where we found her many miles away, there were some sightings. We ended up that by Sunday night, in the middle of the night of that weekend, Dixie was found and brought home. It's an amazing reunion, and that family is just they have their love, you know, through the holidays and this year with their new baby, and it just was a joy and a blessing to be able to participate in that, in supporting them and all that.
That's amazing.
Sorry, Senator.
Yeah, and it's hilarious. These people have no idea I'm their senator, right? I'm just like, I'm helping, you know, find Dixie. And then, like, eventually, like, later on, they're like, oh, my gosh, they figured it out. But I was like, I'm usually not home, but I got to help you find your dog.
You know, and what's really nice about that story, too, is a lot of people calling in know about you through your work with White Coat and your other animal work. But this is the proof positive, in case there's any question, that you walk the walk, off the clock, on the clock. You are fighting for animals every conceivable opportunity in your life. And, you know, we're grateful that spills over into your work here in D.C. So we're pushing up against the clock now. We will have an opportunity, if you didn't get to ask your question, for you to leave that on a voicemail. But I want to thank everyone for their thoughtful questions and comments, and also getting some fun stories out of the senator. The progress we've been making to expose and stop wasteful taxpayer-funded animal experiments is remarkable, and it would not be possible at all without the involvement and generous support of all of our advocates, and certainly without the leadership and outstanding advocacy of Senator Martha McSally. So did you have anything else you wanted to say, Senator?
Well, thanks, Justin. Thanks to you and the team. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for your advocacy. This is something that together we really can make a difference. We can make a difference in the lives of these animals. We can stop cruelty. We can be good stewards of taxpayer resources. This is a unifying issue, and we've been able to get some victories here just this week. I mean, there's other things we're working on. You know, I'm leading on the Humane Cosmetics Act to stop testing for cosmetics. All sorts of things we're working on together. But when we have these victories, we know we've made a difference. There's a whole lot more work to do. So thanks so much for everything you're doing, for organizing this discussion, for all your advocacy. We've just got to make sure that we're not having wasteful government spending, and we don't have these, you know, cruel animal cruelty and animal testing. It's just people need to know what's happening, and it would enrage everyone. So thanks for the call. Thanks everyone who's listening. Thanks for your commitment to protecting animals. and for holding the government accountable. I really appreciate, you're all waste warriors in my book. I really appreciate all you do. And thanks. Keep it up, all right? I look forward to partnering with you in order to save more taxpayers' resources and to save more animals.
Thank you, Senator.
Absolutely. God bless you all. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Erin again. Thank you all for joining us tonight. None of our efforts are possible without your financial support. In fact, we're funded entirely by supporters just like you. Unlike big organizations, we don't have any expensive Hollywood fundraisers or fancy parties with red carpets and ice sculptures. All we have is you, with an average donation of just $28. So anything you can give us tonight, anything at all, will go directly toward our hard-hitting campaigns to educate taxpayers and stop wasteful government animal experiments. Please press 7 if you'd like to chip in now. And again, just thank you. Every single dollar counts. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to every question tonight. If you have additional questions, please just stay on the line to leave a voicemail. We'll listen, I promise. And we couldn't do any of this without your support. Again, our team is standing by to take your calls and donations. Please press 7 if you'd like to donate. And thank you. And if you'd like to find out more information about White Coat Waste Project, please visit whitecoatwaste.org. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well. Thank you again for your time, and have a great night. We hope you stay healthy and safe. So, Justin, if you're still there.
I am. Hello, Aaron.
Hi. It looks like you and I get to talk a little longer now.
Oh, I love that. Means there's people who want to support our work. So let's entertain them.
Yeah. Didn't Senator McSally do a great job? I loved hearing about Boomer. Loved hearing those rescue stories, and, of course, her commitment to our work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that the story of finding that lost dog through the game of telephone ended up with you thinking there was a helicopter involved. But I'm glad she got to tell it.
So, Justin, can you tell me and everybody who's still on the line, a little more about how the White Coat Waste team discovered tax money was going to China and other foreign countries for animal experiments?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a team of researchers here at White Coat who are constantly scouring government databases, animal research databases, federal spending databases that are operated by the federal government, as well as submitting Freedom of Information Act requests to ensure that we are getting access to documents about how the government is spending our money. And when we started last year to look into foreign animal testing, we discovered that there are all of these countries all around the world that have been getting tax dollars for cruel and wasteful animal experiments, including what was happening in the UK and in China. So when we get this information, first we do a summary of all this really technical jargon and some of these protocols and some of these grants. And then we go to Capitol Hill and we let people like Senator McSally know what we found and see if they'd like to get involved in helping end some of this waste and abuse. And we break it to the media. With the Wuhan case, this story really caught on like wildfire. And it really has to, for you to go from breaking an investigation on a Friday and the next Friday the president going on television and announcing basically that you've won your campaign, you really need to build a really strong groundswell of support. And that's where, we do the research, we get it out in the world, but then we need people like Senator McSally taking this and making sure it gets on the president's agenda. And our advocates who are sharing this stuff on Facebook, who are sharing this stuff on Twitter and Instagram, on social media, and sending those emails to Capitol Hill and signing petitions. And I know people see and sign all kinds of stuff all day on Capitol Hill. In their social media, they're seeing and signing all kinds of stuff, and they don't know if it goes anywhere. I can promise you, and this is my personal promise and guarantee, every time someone signs a petition with us, those names go to the members of Congress who represent you and who have to listen. They either directly go through our website or we hand deliver those signatures and let these members know, like Senator McSally and others, that tens of thousands of people in their state want these changes to happen and are going to hold lawmakers accountable if they don't see it happen. And that's how we get this swift and decisive action when we uncover waste and abuse. And again, we couldn't do it without the people who called in tonight who are making animals' voices heard.
I think a lot of times people are surprised to find out how strong their personal voices are when it comes to making change. So you're saying it really does matter when somebody signs a petition or sends an email to their representative's office, that these actions really do let the representative know, let the senators know that this is an issue their constituents are paying attention to.
Absolutely. Lawmakers are accountable to their constituents. And if they hear that voters and taxpayers in their district or their state, in the case of a senator, want to see some action taken, they're going to pay attention. And it's much easier for us to do our job to get animals out of labs effectively if I can walk into a congressional office and say 1,000 people in your district asked you to do this, rather than just walking in, hat in hand, asking them to be nice out of the goodness of their heart. It helps. It is, constituent support is the secret sauce of our work, and that's why we're so grateful for our 2.5 million members who are signing those petitions, making phone calls, and making donations to keep the lights on and keep this important work going.
Well, so that brings me to another question I'd like to hear your answer to. We talked a little bit about Senator McSally's work with us to introduce Violet's Law, the important federal lab animal retirement bill. Where does that currently stand, and what can our listeners here do to help it move along and help it become law?
So Violet's Law, which is also called the After Act, and anyone on this call can call Violet's Law, can visit violetslaw.org and take action and contact your members of Congress. So far, since that bill has been introduced, and there's over 60 co-sponsors in the House right now and bipartisan support in the Senate, so far since that bill has been introduced, the FDA, the National Institutes of Health, and the Department of Veterans Affairs have all enacted policies allowing animals to be retired after experiments. And we've already gotten cats out of government labs. We've already gotten monkeys out of government labs. And we just received records that we've gotten some dogs out of labs as well. And it looks like we might actually have someone calling in right now who has some insight into these things.
Oh, we do. We have Todd from Richmond here. Hi, Todd. Can you hear me?
Hey, how y'all? All right, how y'all doing?
Hey, Todd. How are you?
All right, bud. How you been? It's been a long time no see.
Yeah, absolutely. So Todd is a military veteran who works at the VA or worked at the VA, and he was a whistleblower who was the first one to expose photographs of the dogs being tortured in these heart attack experiments that we described earlier. Todd, do you want to talk a little bit about what you saw and some of the work we've done together?
Yeah, it was. I started at the Richmond VA back in 2012, and I left there last August, and I moved to another government agency, which was it was bittersweet, but a good move for myself. And the bitter part of it was, kind of not being, seeing what's going on, and being able to help fight in the fight. But and the thing it just baffles me that that to me they're doing the same thing over and over. Whenever the VA is confronted with an issue, to me, this is my personal opinion from what I've seen, their first response is no response. And it'll go on for a while, and then maybe they'll give something they might make a statement or whatever. But the whole thing in a nutshell is I think is that the progress that was made in Richmond and other in the VA alone was from people getting involved. We really need to get individuals, just like you were just saying a moment ago, to to whether they write, they email, they phone call their representatives, whether it's their senators or congresspeople. And, and actually we had the same thing here also on the state level in Virginia. We had great success there. That actually just took off, spun off from it, it seemed like, in a firestorm, and it went really fast on the state level here in Virginia to not use taxpayers' money, for government testing.
Yeah.
Now,
I just want to tell everyone a little bit about your story, Todd, in case they haven't been following. We, White Coat Waste, after we exposed the VA dog testing, placed advertisements all around the VA in Richmond, notifying people in the area and people who work there about what was happening inside. Ads that said, "Stop taxpayer funding of dog experiments at the Richmond VA." Todd happened to see one of our ads when he was pumping gas one day at the gas station when he was on his way to work. And soon after that, he was back at work, and days later he got a service call to go into the basement. He's an electrician, to go into the basement and fix something. And what'd you see down there, Todd?
Like I say, I'd been working there for a while, and then I learned about, that they had dogs there, and it kind of really hurt me. I'm a dog lover. I've had dogs all my life. And to see the dogs, you see them in the pens in there. You go down there, if you're just walking down the hall, I guess they can, sense or something that there's small windows on the doors, but they start barking and baying. And that particular day, I think I went in one room, and there was 2 dogs in there, and they looked like, they were probably fairly new and nothing had been done to them. And then the other room I went into, there was one, and I said, that's one of the pictures I took. You can see the incisions on the dog, and that dog was just sitting there shaking. And you could tell she was, you could tell that dog was, scared. Appeared to be in pain, to be, just, you could see her, because of the shave spots on her and the stitch line, you could see her just trembling. And it was heart-wrenching to me every time I ever had to go in there, to see the way those dogs, it's kind of weird, I guess, it's kind of just like people. When you look into a crowd of people, how you see people looking back at you, some of them look at you like, you just kind of think, well, that person, they care less, and that person there looks like they're mad at me, and that person there looks happy or whatever, but you see the different, emotions on their faces and in their eyes, and it was heart-wrenching to go in there. I hated it.
Yeah.
And,
and then yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, but you were a hero. You were a hero for those dogs.
Yeah, and even from the very beginning, when I first learned about it, and before I found out with you guys and all that, when I used to take my dogs to my vet, I used to always ask them, like, hey, you need to, any way, you and all your friends could help me do something to get this, to put some light on this and get it exposed and get it stopped or whatever. And then, at the time, I didn't, it really snowballed really fast. And when I started, when I finally got hooked up with you guys and saw your website and saw all the background work y'all have done on what was going on, and then, like I say, I started doing my own research, and I urge everybody to do that. What does the VA have to show for all these years of work, of wasted resources? What have they done? There is very, very minor, and myself as a veteran, in my personal opinion, I'm thinking about, what they say the veteran population of our country is like maybe around 7% of the population. And then you say, like these tests, like I know what they're doing right here in Richmond, which is one of the few left doing stuff. I'm like, okay, well, out of the veteran population, what percentage of veterans have that issue? And then you still have a number of like 32 per day committing suicide. And I'm looking at that, I'm like, why can't we know we could fix this if we had more resources into it. We could curb that number. And they still come out with different websites, programs, surveys, and whatever, but nothing seems to change. But then they still insist that they have to do this for the treatment of veterans. And I'm like, it just baffles me.
Yeah, I think, Senator McSally, she obviously a fellow veteran, she was speaking about how veterans deserve better. They deserve better treatment. They deserve better attention from the VA. And I just want to stress the impact that you coming forward had. It made this an international story. It got lawmakers to introduce federal legislation, first ever federal legislation, to cut taxpayer funding from the VA dogs experiment. Again, this is all as a result of, you coming forward and working with us. We got legislation first of its kind, the only law in the country like its kind to date, banning state money for funding maximum pain experiments on dogs and cats in the state of Virginia. We got this legislation introduced, the Puppers Act, on the federal level. And since then, we've gotten Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Los Angeles VA hospitals to completely stop experimenting on dogs. We've got Richmond, where you've been fighting, harder than anyone, Todd. We've gotten a lot of their dog testing cut. We got them to stop their maximum pain, the worst experiments where there's no pain relief given. And we've gotten them to phase out a lot of the work. So, I think this, your story, Todd, is a real testament to the power that an individual has to raise awareness about an issue and make change. And we certainly could not do the work we do without you.
And I really urge, anybody listening, to get involved. Make those phone calls, send those emails, follow White Coat Waste, and because they're the ones that are gathering all this information for us, and there's a huge source of information right there. And then you got to pass that along to your representatives, whether your senators, your congressperson, and you need to get a little involved, and if you could do something. We were also lucky here in the Richmond area to have a news media person here in Richmond area, Carrie O'Brien. She got very involved with it. If you're somewhere in your area, especially if you're in Wyoming or California, just because you're not in an area of a VA doing this type of stuff, get involved and get everybody involved. That's how we're going to win and stop this. It's proven. We proved that right here in Richmond,
Yeah, absolutely, Todd. Absolutely. And I think the changes we're seeing at the VA absolutely can be translated to other agencies. And if people want to do what Todd is telling you and recommending, and he knows better than almost anyone, he's been to Capitol Hill with us. He's lobbied. He's gotten members of Congress who didn't want to support this stuff to sign on. He's an incredible advocate. If you want to join us in the work we're doing with Todd and other whistleblowers and veterans who are blowing the whistle on cruelty and abuse and waste at the VA, you can go to puppersact.com, and on that website you can write directly to your members of Congress and send a letter right into their inbox asking them to co-sponsor the Puppers Act and make it law so we can cut taxpayer funding for all painful experiments on dogs at the VA. So Todd, thank you so much for your advocacy and your service and your bravery. White Coat and the dogs and everyone across the country really owes you a debt of gratitude. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for me as well, Todd, and thank you for calling in tonight. You really have a powerful story to tell, and we really appreciate you calling in to tell it and for all of your work. Justin, are you still there with me?
I am. I'm hanging on here. We've got a long line of people who are asking questions and working to make donations. So we'll hang on as long as these people are hanging on with us. It looks like we had a couple callers who wanted to come in that we're waiting on, but
well, while we're waiting, why don't you tell me a little bit about why the issue of cutting government spending for animal experimentation is so important to you? It was really powerful hearing about that from Senator McSally and then just now from Todd as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always interesting to hear how people become so involved, and this becomes an important part of their lives. When I got to graduate school at the University of Connecticut in the early 2000s, I found out that there was a monkey lab on campus that no one knew about it. It wasn't something I'd ever heard of before, but it seemed to me wrong that it existed. And I kind of took it on as my personal mission to shut it down. So I learned how to use the Freedom of Information Act. I learned how to write a press release. I learned how to plan a protest. The small grassroots organization that I started at the University of Connecticut exposed horrible abuses in this laboratory where monkeys were being abused and having veterinary care withheld from them. It was a really horrible place, and none of the inspectors from the government had caught any of those problems. They were never reported. So we exposed them, and fast forward 2 years later, that lab got shut down through constant campaigning, grassroots campaigning, pressure on state lawmakers and federal lawmakers, and pressure on the university leadership. We saw that grant. That was the taxpayer-funded grant that was paying for invasive experiments on monkeys' brains where acid was used to destroy the part of the brain that controlled their eyes, and so they lost control of their eye movements. We shut that project down, and the guy running it stopped experimenting on animals. He was a doctor, and he put his knowledge to good use and started helping patients instead of hurting animals. It was the perfect ending. That was my first foray into advocacy, and I thought, well, if I could do this with no resources and just as a student, that it really inspired me that there was a lot more potential. And when I learned during that campaign that most animal testing in the country is funded by taxpayers, it really incensed me as someone who opposed taxpayer-funded animal abuse. I just felt like the government had no place to be spending our money to hurt animals, especially when a majority of Americans, both then and now, and a growing majority of Americans now, opposed the use of animals in experiments. So I was very, very lucky to hook up with our president and founder, Anthony Bellotti, who started White Coat Waste Project, and about 4 years ago, and start up the campaigns over here where we're looking at all the taxpayer-funded animal experimentation, not only in the country, as we learned on this call, around the world, looking at all that money is going and where we can make the most progress the fastest. And again, there's not many times in your life where you get to see, especially if you're in this world for a long time and working in, on animal protection issues or animal testing issues, you don't often get a victory in a week from start to finish. And of course, there's a lot of foundational work goes into that. But I'm very, very grateful to work with you and Anthony and an incredible team at White Coat who are so incredibly smart and talented and dedicated and who are fighting every day and feel just as strongly that our life's mission is to get animals out of taxpayer-funded labs. And we're seeing progress on that every day, and it's encouraging and it's inspiring. It's what I get up to do every morning. And it's incredible to see thousands of people calling in who feel just as strongly about the issue as well.
Yeah, that's a great story. That's a great story, Justin. I mean, what an incredible way to start off your career in animal advocacy.
It was luck, a little bit of luck maybe in my first foray, but I learned a lot, and it really helped me build a skill set that I'm able to use today to do all the important work we're talking about. I think now we have a very special caller actually on the phone. Aaron, I don't know if you want to put her into the queue.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Monica Sellis. I just want to say thank you very much to Senator McSally, to Justin and Anthony for putting this together. Just to give a quick background, I used to play professional tennis for many, many years, but more importantly, I'm an animal lover. It was it all around. And I'm really a newcomer to this arena, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to ask a question. For me, as a U.S. taxpayer for a very, very long time, it was heartbreaking to learn what happens to these animals in research labs. Absolutely heartbreaking and very hard to really even acknowledge that this is happening. Thanks to White Coat Waste and to what they have been doing, I've been making myself more and more aware of it and learning about it. I myself, as some of you who follow tennis obviously know my history, and I speak very openly about it, about my mental health issues after my stabbing and my father's death. I found huge, immense comfort in my dog. Without this dog, I probably am not sure if I would be here talking to you today. And for me, as having good amount of veterans in my group of inner circle, as we all call it, that I can trust and they can trust me. I've seen the power of animals, therapy dogs that they can produce. So when I learned that, again, my hard-earned money, my taxes where they're going to support this, and providing more trauma to vets who hear about what's going on to these animals, let alone some who see this, is providing more trauma instead of using these dogs to provide them therapy. And I just want to see, what can I as an individual do, somebody who has experienced different trauma, not combat trauma, but trauma on my job, that firsthand I can see what this animal did to me. And then also in today's world, to raise our consciousness to stop animal testing all around, I think the U.S. should be a leader in this. Is it for dogs, cats, primates? That I myself suffer from a disease that unfortunately Texas A&M University breeds dogs to test for this disease, and I find it abhorring, and I've been trying in my own way to stop that. But just as an individual, what can we all do? And really for the vets out there who have post-traumatic syndrome, and that we don't create more trauma for them. We need to provide them therapy in these dogs. And we all can attest to the animal-human bond and how unbreakable that is when that animal looks at you. And they don't want anything else from you, just love and food and water and comfort. And once again, thank you so much. And I just also wanted to say thank you to somebody like Todd, who spoke up and did something about it. I myself am still trying to learn more about how to become active as an individual and really to stop animal testing in labs. I mean, and on our own taxpayer money. I mean, when I originally heard of this, I couldn't believe that this was actually happening in my country, the United States. So thank you again to all of you.
Thank you, Monica. It is really, I am so honored and proud to be on the phone with you right now. This is fantastic, and we're so grateful for your support. And you make some great points, and I think the trauma that people like you and certainly that military veterans have experienced have really helped them sympathize with the plight of these animals and become advocates for them. And some of our greatest advocates on the VA dog testing issue are Senator McSally, Todd Wiesner, who just called in, Sherman Gillums at the National Veteran Service Organization, AMVETS. Some of the leaders in the veteran space in this country have been outstanding advocates on this particular issue for all of those reasons that, Monica, you just raised. The fact that it is traumatizing for many veterans to see what's happening to these dogs, that at the VA's hands with their tax money, when some people like Todd, for example, not only is Todd a dog lover in his personal life, but he has had to wait up to 9 months for a doctor's appointment at the VA because there's not enough caregivers there, yet there's an entire floor dedicated to dog experiments. And there's been a lot of frustration with people who are dealing with trauma and other medical conditions that so much time and money and space and other resources are being wasted on dead-end animal testing that we know is not going to advance health care for veterans or anybody else. So it is so important, as we've been saying throughout this call, to make your voice heard. Listen, on a cosmetics testing issue, you have the choice to boycott a company or not. With taxpayer, with government animal testing, you have to pay your taxes. So you have to pay your taxes, but you can also hold the government accountable for how it is spending that money. So we're talking about the Puppers Act right now and VA dog testing here at the end of the call. I encourage everybody to visit puppersact.com and tell them what you heard from Senator McSally and Todd Wiesner and our good friend Monica Sellis. Let them know that this waste and and abuse and cruelty is unacceptable. Veterans oppose it, you oppose it, and that's not how you want your tax dollars spent. All right, I think that looks like the queue is now at 0, so everyone has been able to make a donation or ask their questions. Thank you again, everybody, for your time tonight, for your questions, for your enthusiasm, for showing up. We hope you stay safe and healthy. Thank you for your support and your advocacy. We'll talk to you soon.